Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here today for this very important webinar and news conference, Voices from the Classroom, Teaching in the Golden State, and Developing a Strategy for Teacher Retention and Recruitment, a partnership between the California Teachers Association and the Center for Transformation of Schools with the University of California, Los Angeles. We will get started momentarily. And we will go over some housekeeping items, but thank you so much for joining. We will give participants just another minute or so to join, and we will get started with our program. In the meantime, for our members of the media who are on the call today, thank you for joining us. You will have an opportunity to ask questions by placing them in the Q&A portion that is at the bottom of the screen. And then we will be answering those at the end of the program. So you have time to enter your questions into the Q&A, but that is the format that we will be using to submit those questions. And I do want to remind everybody that this webinar and news conference is being live streamed on Facebook and recorded as well. So you will be able to access and review later once the link is live. So we have more participants join. Welcome everybody to the webinar this afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Voices from the Classroom, Developing a Strategy for Teacher Retention and Recruitment. A partnership between UCLA and CTA today. We will be getting started in just a moment, just giving folks a little bit more time to join. And to our friends, our members of the media who are on this call today, you are welcome to submit questions into the Q&A portion that is at the bottom of the screen. They will be addressed later at the end of the program, but you are welcome to do so and put them in the Q&A. Please do identify yourself, name, last name, and the news outlet that you're with. Okay, well, without any further ado, we're going to get started. My name is Claudia Briggs with the California Teachers Association. Thank you so much for being here today for this very important survey results, this very important webinar and announcement. And without any further ado, I'm going to send it over to Dr. Kai Matthews, who is with the UCLA Center for the Transformation of Schools. Kai, thank you.
Sorry, I had to take myself off of mute. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Happy Tuesday. Thank you for being here. My name is Dr. Kai Matthews, and I'm the Research Director of the California Educator Diversity Project at UCLA's Center for the Transformation of Schools. Back in April of this year, CTS partnered with the California Teachers Association to commission a representative survey of current K-12 teachers in the state. Hart Research Associates surveyed over 4,600 teachers on everything from job satisfaction, workplace discrimination, and perspectives on the preparation teachers receive before entering the field. We really feel like this data is not only timely, but necessary given the state's desire and real need to have a more sustainable and diverse teacher workforce. And it's really our hope that these findings are not only raise the level of discussion that's being had around the challenges that teachers are facing, but they also act as a catalyst for bold action that is humanizing and holistic. And so to further discuss the importance of this work, it is my great pleasure to introduce Toby Boyd, President of the California Teachers Association.
Thank you very much. And thank you. I'm pleased to be here today and to join with the UCLA Center for the Transformation of Schools in doing this work. CTA is proud to be in partnership with them. Exhausting, stressful, frustrating, overwhelming. These are the 4 words that teachers and other classroom educators chose to best describe what it's like to teach right now. Listen, exhausting, stressful, frustrating, overwhelming. I can feel those words. Those of you who have been teachers in classrooms can feel those words. We can also probably remember some of the conditions that produce those feelings. The research findings you will hear about today are telling why we continue to struggle to retain and recruit teachers, especially teachers of color. I myself am a bit of an anomaly. I'm a Black male teaching kindergarten, when we actually need more educators who look like the students they are teaching. We know California ranks at the top of the list of teacher shortages nationwide. Some estimate that the teaching shortage this year at about 50,000 educators. We know many districts are still struggling to fill positions. Some districts are even offering transfer bonuses. As you will hear from this research, salary is a top reason for teachers not entering the profession and for not staying in the profession. Teachers are not fairly compensated for the work, time, effort, and emotional commitment they give to the job. The many hours teachers work outside the classroom are essentially unpaid, and many educators are forced to take on a second job just to make ends meet. The financial stress is real. The educators' struggle is to find affordable housing near where they teach, the struggle to keep up with basic living expenses, to provide childcare for their own children, or save for the future is real. We know that teachers are paid less than their college-educated peers in other professions, a trend that keeps getting worse, widening. According to a recent study, teachers earn 23% less than comparable college graduates. In other words, an average teacher earns 76.5 cents on the dollar compared to similar college-educated professionals. Of course, salary is not the only concern. Working conditions also contribute to teachers leaving the professions. A teacher's workload continues to increase. Additional duties are added on daily, weekly, and on monthly basis. And let's not forget about the class sizes. They're getting bigger, contributing and adding to the stress and the higher burnout. With this study, we also sought to understand the role of diversity and inclusions in teacher retention and recruitment. It's significant and disheartening to find that teachers of color feel less comfortable being their authentic selves. They feel uncomfortable expressing themselves, and that many of them have experienced racial discrimination in their current position. Finally, we also have to look at some of the barriers to getting into the profession, especially for aspiring teachers of color: the financial stress, the student loans, excessive testing and bureaucracy adds to the burden of the students. This, folks, is a crisis, and it's a crisis that we need to come together to address at all levels of our system, from the legislature to the classroom. You know, we partnered with UCLA to do this survey so we could broadcast the voices of educators across California. So as you go through this presentation today, I'd like to challenge you with two things to do. One, keep in mind that these are lived human experiences behind the data. And two, go out and have a conversation with teachers you may have been blessed with having in your lives or in your neighborhood schools about their concerns and ideas. Now, I want to thank you for coming, and we look forward to working together in the partnership with you all. I'm going to turn it back over to you folks. Thank you again.
Thank you, Toby, for framing the context of this research. It's so important to keep in mind that as we hear these findings, these are essentially the voices of thousands of teachers from across the state. So next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Rebecca Nasser, partner at Hart Research Associates and lead researcher on this work, who will be presenting the key findings, along with Abigail Davenport, also partner at Hart Research Associates, and Jeffrey Guerin, president at Hart. Dr. Nasser, the floor is all yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Matthews. And I also just want to give a quick thank you, a very big thank you to all of the folks at CTA and at the Center for the Transformation of Schools at UCLA. This was a true collaborative effort, and I think everybody involved is just very excited to share what we learned from the research. I'm going to spend some time talking through some of the key findings from the research, but before I do that, just a quick minute on what we did. This webinar deck will be available after we're finished with the presentation, and in the appendix of that deck, there are more slides that go into more detail about our methodology, the sample, and as well as profiles of the individuals that participated in the qualitative interviews that we conducted. But this was a multi-phase research project. The first phase was an online survey of 4,632 TK through 12th grade teachers who work in California. We conducted the survey online in late May and early June. For those that are the polling people, the margin of error for the survey is plus or minus 1.5 percentage points. And then the second phase of the research consisted of 51 exploratory qualitative in-depth interviews. And we conducted 26 among former teachers who have recently left the classroom to pursue work opportunities outside of education altogether, to learn about the challenges that they faced and their perspectives and what was the impetus for them leaving the classroom, and 25 in-depth interviews among aspiring teachers who are enrolled in or recently graduated from California teacher prep programs. As has been said already, we've peppered in some of the qualitative findings throughout this presentation because the voices of the teachers that participated in those interviews do such a good job of contextualizing what we learned through the survey research. So I'm going to share my screen at this point, and off we go. Let's see. I'm having trouble moving there we go. So we're going to begin with a look at how California teachers are feeling about the work that they do and their outlook for the future. In terms of the things that motivate individuals to enter the teaching profession and stay in the teaching profession, it's really more rooted in altruistic reasons than sort of the practical benefits of the profession itself. So we asked teachers who have been in the profession for more than 5 years why they stay in the profession, and we asked teachers who have been in the profession for 5 years or less what motivated them to want to become teachers. And as you can see here, the two things that really kind of trump everything else are helping students and more broadly making a positive difference in our world today. And that's true across the board. If we look at different segments, if we look at teachers by age and sort of where they are in their career, those are the two things that really do motivate teachers to become teachers and to stay in the classroom. There are some minor differences among the subsets within the larger teacher population, but really helping students and helping kids grow and learn are the main drivers. As Dr. Boyd so nicely foreshadowed in his comments a few minutes ago, there are a number of descriptive terms, both positive and negative, that teachers say do a good job of describing the work that they do. Unfortunately, the negative phrases or descriptors are more in line with how teachers sort of describe the work that they do than the positive ones. And here I'm really focused on the bright red portions of these bars. This is the proportion of teachers statewide that told us that each of these terms does a very good job of describing the work that they do. So 7 in 10 teachers tell us that exhausting describes very well the work they do in the classroom. 6 in 10 stressful. 50% or half tell us that frustrating and overwhelming are good descriptors of the work that they do. And then it's not that these positive terms don't apply, it's just that the intensity isn't the same as some of the negative terms. So roughly a third tell us that rewarding, 3 in 10 fulfilling, and then a quarter demoralizing, and even less than that, empowering are good terms or do a good job of describing the work that they do as teachers in the classroom. So a much more negative lens in terms of how they're evaluating the work that, or how their work makes them feel, than positive lens. We all have teacher friends, right? And we've all heard a lot about how teaching has really become more challenging since the onset of the pandemic. And we wanted to dig a little deeper into that in the poll. And so we asked respondents to reflect back to before the beginning of the pandemic and tell us if conditions in the field of teaching had during that period were changing for the better, were changing for the worse, or really we're not changing in either direction. And on the left side of this screen, you see that a plurality of teachers, 45%, told us that before the onset of the pandemic, things were changing for the worse. A similar proportion, 40%, said they really weren't changing in either direction, and 14% said they were changing for the better. We then asked them the same question, but within the time frame of since the pandemic began. And here you see a really quite stark difference in perspective. So almost 8 in 10 California teachers are telling us that since the onset of the pandemic, things in the profession are changing for the worse. Only 8% tell us things are changing for the better. And that proportion that tell us things weren't really moving in either direction has dropped from 40% to just 15%. So very serious erosion in how teachers in California view sort of the direction of the profession, and certainly not good indicators when our objective and our motivation is to try to improve teacher retention. We see a fair amount of variation in terms of how California teachers assess their job satisfaction. We used a 1 to 5 point scale and asked teachers to locate themselves. So the blue bars are teachers that place themselves on the higher end of the scale, 4s and 5s, folks that are more highly satisfied with their job overall. The yellow bar are people that are sort of in the middle, 29% sort of have mediocre satisfaction with their job. And then a third of California teachers are on the lower end of that satisfaction scale in terms of their current teaching position overall. And then if you look on the right, we have pulled out the percentage of teachers that are highly satisfied by some of these subgroups. And here we do see some variation. Registering lower levels of satisfaction are younger teachers under age 35, teachers that have not been in the field that long. You see that as tenure increases within the teaching profession, satisfaction goes up, a higher proportion are satisfied. And we also see that there's some variation in terms of the level of school that they're teaching. So elementary teachers tell us that they're the least satisfied, and then middle school, and then on up to high school. We're going to take a really close look at satisfaction across several of the dimensions that are involved in the day-to-day of teaching. But before we did that, we wanted to give teachers in the poll the opportunity to share with us in their own voices what the things are that they like most about teaching and what the things are that they like least about teaching. And so we answered that, or we asked that in 2 open-ended questions. And one of the interesting things that emerged from the poll in terms of the findings is that students are very central both to satisfaction and to dissatisfaction with the situation that current teachers are facing. So what you're seeing on the screen here are coded open-ended responses to an open-ended question. And the most frequently mentioned positive things that California teachers like about their job have to do with some of the things that motivated them to enter the profession to begin with. So helping students grow and mature, teaching students to learn, just connecting with students. In the qualitative interviews, we had several of the former teachers talk about the joy that they feel when they see that light bulb go off and a student actually grasps something that they've been struggling with. And then on the flip side of the coin, you really see kind of a similar dynamic. Student-related things, so these do intersect with some of the other issues that teachers are dissatisfied with, which student-related things are some of the most frequently mentioned things that teachers are dissatisfied with. So student truancy and disciplinary issues, behavioral problems, those intersect a lot also with feeling that parents are not fully respecting teachers, especially when there are disciplinary problems with kids, and that school leadership can also kind of fall into that category of not necessarily backing up teachers when there are disciplinary issues or behavioral issues with students. So as I said, we wanted to take a very close look at how satisfied teachers are with many specific aspects of the job that they do in the classroom and in teaching. And so I know there's a lot on this slide. There's a lot of data and a lot of different things, but we gave them all of the things listed down the left hand of the slide, and we asked them again to use that 1 to 5 scale to assess how satisfied they are with each of these attributes of teaching. And one of the really important findings is the low levels of satisfaction with many of the sort of nuts and bolts aspects of teaching that really affect these teachers' ability to kind of do their job on a day-to-day basis. And I'm going to work from the bottom of the slide to the top, and I'm looking at those orange sections of the bars. So majorities of California teachers have low levels of satisfaction with the district level leadership in their school district. They have low levels of satisfaction with the ability to have input on really important professional and academic decisions that affect them on a day-to-day basis in the classroom, their workload, their class size, having enough supports and resources to really do their job well, their salary, we'll talk about that in more detail in a minute, as well as their work-life balance. These are all things that very high proportions of California teachers are telling us are not working for them right now. If we look at the things that they're more likely to have higher levels of satisfaction with, being accepted for who they are personally, 6 and 10 tell us that they're highly satisfied with that. That's probably not as high as we would hope. And then the second item on the slide, having a work environment that's free of discrimination and prejudice. 51% of teachers in California tell us that they're on the higher end of the satisfaction scale with that. That means that the other half tell us that they're in the mediocre or the low level of satisfaction with that. I want to put a pin in that for a minute. We'll come back to it. But this is an area where, as you might expect, we saw significant differences when we broke things out by race and ethnicity. So there are some serious implications for how teachers are feeling about that. Another one of the really important findings from the research is the depth and breadth of the financial challenges that California teachers are facing and the stress that creates for them. This is not just about not making enough money. This has far-reaching implications for many, many aspects of their lives. And we asked teachers simply whether the following things on this slide are easy or difficult for them to do. And huge proportions of California teachers are telling us that many of these things or most of these things are hard for them and their families. 8 in 10 California teachers tell us that it's hard for them to find affordable housing near where they teach. 75% tell us it's difficult to save for long-term goals like purchasing a home. Almost 7 in 10 tell us it's challenging for them to keep up with basic living expenses and the cost of living. And the same proportion tell us it's hard for them to save for retirement. So very significant impacts on all kinds of different aspects of their lives, not just their job in the classroom. Even a majority of California teachers who have kids tell us that it is challenging or difficult for them to provide for their own children. And as I said, we peppered some of the findings from the qualitative research into this deck. And this is really just to reinforce what I just said. In the qualitative research, there was a real feeling. It's not just that the pay is low; it's that it's not fair, that they're not fairly compensated for everything that they contribute to the classroom, to their kids, not just in terms of their teaching, but emotionally. Many of them talked about having to use their own resources to buy supplies for school. those kinds of things. We talked to a lot of teachers in the qualitative research that actually took on extra work, either in the school setting as a coach or a tutor, or completely outside of the school setting, working as in a restaurant or working in some service capacity to try to supplement their incomes to make ends meet. And there are some really good quotes that we've shared throughout the deck. So given what we've learned about teacher satisfaction and their outlook for the future, the million-dollar question is really, what can we do to help shore up teacher retention and encourage teachers to stay in the classroom more long-term? But before we do that, we wanted to get a measure of the severity of the problem in California, and it's pretty stark. We asked all of the teachers in the survey, realistically speaking, what are the chances you will leave the teaching profession within the next 3 years? And what you see here is a significant minority of California teachers, 43%, tell us that there is at least a 50-50 chance that they're going to be leaving teaching within the next 3 years. And this is a pervasive problem you'll see across the occupation. So 1 in 5 tell us that they're probably or definitely leaving within 3 years, and another 22% say it's a 50-50 chance. And then if we look at this by different segments of the full universe of teachers, again, there's a lot going on this slide, but the sort of big takeaway for me is that the crisis of teacher retention in California spans the profession. So there are some groups that are more likely to tell us that they're probably or definitely going to leave within the next 3 years. Teachers, I don't want to call 55 old, but teachers that are older, age 55 and older, 43% say that they will probably or definitely leave within 3 years. Teachers that have been at it longer, those that have been working in the classroom 25 years or more, 39% tell us they will probably or definitely be gone within the next 3 years. And if we add those that say there's a 50-50 chance for those two groups, it's over, it's over half, it's a majority. But there are very disturbing signals if we look at some of these other groups, younger teachers in particular, those under age 35, a full 1/3 of them say that they will probably or definitely leave within the next 3 years. And if you add on those that say 50-50, it's over 50%. So again, across the spectrum, we see very high rates of teachers thinking very seriously about leaving the profession. And then among those teachers that told us that there was a 50-50 chance or more that they would be leaving the profession within the next 3 years, we wanted to understand what the factors were that were contributing to that. So we gave them this list of items and we asked them to rank the top 3 that are sort of the most powerful in making them feel like they could potentially want to leave the profession. And again, as Dr. Boyd mentioned, burnout from stress is the top factor across the board. But I would sort of posit that a lot of these other really important things on this slide can lead to burnout and stress. So 40% of California teachers tell us that the reality of the situation is that teachers are becoming more and more the target of political and ideological attacks, and that is contributing to the possibility that they will leave the profession. A lot of the things on this slide that are similar to the things where we saw very low levels of satisfaction, feeling that they're overworked and they have too many responsibilities, staff shortages, low pay, a lack of respect from parents, a lack of balance in between their work and their personal life, issues with leadership, both at the school level and the district level. So that there are a lot of things here contributing to the fact that teachers are questioning whether they want to continue with the profession. So what do California teachers think would help if our goal is to encourage more teachers to stay in the profession for longer? We gave them this list and we had them go at this 2 different ways. First, we had them rate each of these in terms of how big of a priority they think each one should be. And that's the data down the right part of the slide is the percentage that rated each as a top or a very high priority. But then we gave them the list again, and we said, now you have to rank the top 4 things that you think would help encourage teachers to stay in the classroom longer here in California. Not surprising, better pay, again, is at the top of the list. And smaller class sizes is a close second. I think that those things are important because they have a benefit in and of themselves, but they also help address some of those other concerns that we heard teachers echo. They would have an impact on financial stress much more broadly. They would help with burnout. They would help with feeling overloaded and like they're carrying more of a burden in the classroom than they feel like they can realistically handle. Strengthening discipline policies for students that behave in a disruptive manner. Just over half of teachers tell us they think that that would be a policy change that would really help, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. And then better staffing, more manageable workloads, and more supportive services for students. It's kind of interesting to me in the qualitative, we heard from some of the former teachers that have left that the students that were behaving disruptively, one of the big solutions to that was more services to help those students. They want to see counselors, they want to see social workers, they want to see healthcare providers provided right there in the schools to help address some of those issues that they're managing alone or close to alone at this point. As I said, we'd take another look at this strengthening discipline policies for students who behave disruptively. Among teachers who tell us that they will definitely be leaving the profession within the next 3 years, this is they place a high priority on this. So better pay is the sort of #1 policy objective they articulate across the board. But strengthening discipline policies is something that's really important for those teachers that tell us that they're definitely going to be leaving in the near future. So pay, it's no surprise I think to anyone that the teacher pay is an issue. We've been talking about teacher pay for years and the need to address that. But in the qualitative interviews, teachers brought up top of mind without prompting a lot of things that they believe would help teacher retention that are related to financial stress, but are not directly increasing teacher pay. They want to see more help for teachers that are trying to navigate the affordable housing crisis in California. They want to see student loan forgiveness. They want financial literacy programs and other programs to help them manage the limited resources that they have. They want professional development that isn't just professional development to check a box. They want professional development that will help them actually climb the salary ladder so they can earn more money. So all of these things related to the financial duress that they face right now. And then among our aspiring teachers, I think it's really important to keep in mind that we don't just want to retain teachers, right? We want to keep the pipeline flush. And there are financial stress among aspiring teachers is very significant, very significant. 18 of the 25 aspiring teachers we interviewed told us that financial hardship and stress was an issue in terms of their teacher preparation. And it's not just the tuition to attend college, it's the assessments, especially because a number of them have to retake assessments and the high costs of those assessments when they're literally living on a student budget. And a really big issue that came up again and again in these qualitative interviews was not being compensated for student teaching. And not only is this a financial issue, but it's a fairness issue. These student teachers feel like they are essentially being exploited because they are they're working in the classroom, albeit it's a learning experience, but they feel strongly that they should be paid or there should be a stipend for those activities that they engage in. So another primary objective of the research, as Dr. Matthews said, was to explore and better understand the racialized experiences of teachers of color in California. And frankly, the survey reveals some very disturbing realities in terms of the experiences of teachers of color. in California that really do demand, I think, attention at a high level. So we asked survey respondents the extent to which they agree or disagree with this series of statements that are, it's a battery of statements that all are reflective of a school environment that is supportive of diversity and inclusion. And then the question was, what is the degree to which you agree or disagree with the scale across the top of the slide? And well, what I will focus on here is the dark blue sections of these bars, because, well, for example, a majority of California teachers tell us that they agree that the environment at your school is supportive of different cultures. Somewhat agreeing with that statement isn't a huge endorsement in my mind, right? We want teachers to feel, and we want reality to be, that the school environment in schools throughout California truly does embody the value of diversity and inclusion. So I would focus on the fact that truly less than half of students feel strongly that their schools embody these values that indicate a commitment to diversity and inclusion. And importantly, when we look at this, if we break it out by different racial and ethnic categories, we see very, very divergent points of view across those categories. And what we see is that white teachers are much more inclined to think that their schools embody many of these characteristics, but truly not at sufficiently high rates compared to their teacher of color counterparts. So, for example, if you look at the item, I feel comfortable being my authentic self at the school, while roughly half of white teachers strongly agree with that statement. As we go down the line, you see that proportion gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And so clearly indicating different perspectives and different realities in terms of the lived experiences of teachers in public schools based on their racial and ethnic identities. Excuse me. And then when we dig a little deeper to explore not just attitudes, but the specific experiences of teachers of color, it provides some really important context in terms of why they have the perspectives that they do about the school environments in which they work. So we asked teachers of color, in your school, do you almost always feel comfortable expressing yourself as a Black person, Native American person, Asian person, et cetera, Hispanic person? Or are there times when you feel uncomfortable expressing yourself as such? And what you see here are significant proportions of teachers of color who tell us that there are situations in their current work environment where they sometimes feel uncomfortable expressing themselves in terms of their racial or ethnic identity. A majority of Black teachers in California, 60%, tell us they sometimes feel uncomfortable. Almost 4 in 10 Asian teachers and 4 in 10 Native American teachers tell us that they sometimes feel uncomfortable. And 1 in 5 Hispanic teachers tell us the same. So serious concern in terms of what these teachers of color are experiencing. And then earlier, if you recall, when we were talking through teacher satisfaction with different elements of teaching, I asked that we just put a pin on something and come back to it, and it's this item right here. Satisfaction with having a work environment that's free of discrimination and prejudice. And here again, we see very different realities in terms of how teachers experience the work environments that they go to every day to teach our children. So a majority of white teachers are highly satisfied that they work in such an environment. And we see that proportion dips as we go from left to right on the slide. So teachers definitely are having different lived experiences in terms of the environment that they work in. And then disturbingly, when we go to the actual experiences that the lived experiences that teachers of color have in their daily lives as teachers, and this is reflective of, we ask this in the context of their current teaching position. Do you ever experience racial discrimination at your current teaching position? And here what you see is that majorities of Asian and Black California teachers tell us that they have experienced racial discrimination in their current position. So this isn't even career-wide, it's just the current position they're holding. And significant proportions of Native American and Hispanic teachers have experienced discrimination as well. So this informs, you know, in some way, this helps explain the different perceptions of the environment they work in, because they are having very different experiences. And we asked a similar question to LGBTQ plus teachers to understand the proportion that have experienced discrimination based on their sexual orientation. And here again, you see that 4 in 10 LGBTQ plus teachers tell us that in their current position, they have experienced discrimination. So, you know, while factors like salary and pay and workload, staffing are really important, obviously, to teacher retention, finding ways to create educational environments that truly are fostering and encouraging of diversity and inclusion, and certainly not tolerant of blatant discrimination, is a really, really important part of this conversation about teacher retention. So I'm going to leave it there and turn it back over to Dr. Matthews.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nasser. This was super important, informative, and powerful. And also thank you for all of the work that you and your team put in on this research. We're now going to open the floor up for questions. We hope to get a couple in before we hear closing statements or closing. If you would like to ask a question, please address that in the Q&A. And if you are part of the media, please remember to put in your title and your name along with your questions so that we can make sure that we're prioritizing those responses.
Okay. Let's see, we have a question. Can you hear me? We have a question from Howard Bloom. Let's see here. Howard Bloom is with the LA Times, and Howard would like to talk about regional differences. And I know some of this was covered, but Dr. Nasser, if you can go over this a little bit. Are teachers joining, just as one example, his question is, are teachers from high cost areas more concerned about higher pay? Do teachers from less urban, more conservative areas have more concerns about freedom of speech and freedom to teach? Topics such as past and current racism, for example. And then Howard is also interested in generational differences in viewpoints and differences correlated to race and ethnicity among teachers.
Hey, Claudia, this is Abigail with Hart Research, and I'm going to jump in and just answer some of Howard's great questions.
Thank you so much.
When we asked teachers who were at least a 50-50 chance that they would leave the profession, why they would do so, burnout from stress is sort of the top criteria or factor for teachers across the board, but teachers in higher cost areas are more likely to mention salary as an issue. And that sort of comes as the second factor, second most important factor that's mentioned. Whereas teachers in less urban areas, other parts of the state, are more likely to select the response option that we gave of teachers becoming targets of political and ideological attacks that make it harder for them to do their jobs. Also, teachers who are teaching at schools in urban areas are notably more likely to express or express lower levels of satisfaction with their salary, and citing that's a bigger issue. So 40% of those in urban areas compared to 18% of those in small town rural parts of the state. Again, that's where the schools are located. But so salary is more of an issue in the higher cost areas of the state. That is not to say salary is an issue all across the state, but just relatively speaking, it does pop a little bit more there.
Okay, thank you so much. And then we have this question. I'm going to have Toby Boyd answer. Toby, the question is from Ali Tadayan with Cal Matters. And the question is, can you speak to all of the shuffling, teachers being relocated to different schools or classes going on due to the ongoing teacher shortage? Is there a major cause of burnout among California teachers and educators? And has there been an increase in shuffling as the available teacher workforce shrinks?
That's a lot, and I didn't write it down, so I apologize. But I can just speak to the fact that because there's such a shortage and the students are still coming to the classroom, so they would have to have someone, an adult, preferably a certificated employee, cover those classes. And if they have a class that doesn't happen until the later afternoons, then they move them into that space so they can have the coverage. And you sometimes have administrators going into those spaces, but that's the reason why you have all the shuffling. And Claudia, what was some of the other ones so I can hopefully answer?
Well, it's what we've been talking about, Toby, and you've been discussing for some time now about burnout among California teachers. And because of burnout, are we seeing an increase in shuffling around as the workforce shrinks?
Well, the survey just stated it. Because of the stress, because of the burnout, because of in some instances, the lack of pay, and just from the fact that teaching has changed so dramatically in terms of being able to truthfully teach honesty, what happens in our society and in our past. So you put all those things together, and the result is that you have more people exiting, which means that we don't have enough people coming in, which means that we have to have other people shuffle in order to cover classes.
Thank you, Toby. Abigail, we have another question here from Howard. If we can go back to slide 5.
Yeah, sorry, I was just typing in the chat. It was asking teachers to look back. He was asking, this was about COVID and sort of pre-COVID, and then since COVID, asking teachers about their perceptions of whether things have changed for the better or the worse. We were asking them to think back about conditions pre-COVID. That pre-COVID is not from a previous survey that was conducted pre-COVID. It was the same survey.
Again, a reminder for our media participants today, please put your question in the Q&A so we can get to those. And then I did want to let everybody know that the links to the PowerPoint that you saw here, to the executive summary, and to the report are all in the chat. Our team has linked those for you. If you weren't able to keep up with the notes as all this important information was being shared. So again, links on the right side of your screen there in the chat. We have another question. This is actually from a participant. The question is, as we know and can see from this data, lack of job satisfaction and teacher retention is a chronic issue exacerbated by COVID. Do we know of any school districts that are working to proactively disrupt the trend, and what strategies are being used? And are those strategies working? Are they shifting any of this? Dr. Kai, do you want to take this?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of school districts are being innovative and creative in terms of types of resources that they're providing for their teachers. I mean, I want to, off the top of my head, I'm just thinking of Oakland Unified School District and the amount of creative solutions they're finding to lack of housing, affordable housing for teachers, building in community schools and pulling on community-based businesses to offer supports that they alone can't provide. I think, you know, if you were to ask the average teacher in Oakland, they do see some significant progress. They do see some things changing. Are we there yet? Are they there yet? I don't know if they would say that they have accomplished what they need to accomplish in order to make teachers feel safe, secure, and well supported. But I think, you know, those are some, that is a district that is taking really bold action in terms of trying to address some of these needs.
Okay, thank you. So this is a good question. And I'm going to, I'm actually going to hold this question for after the presentation, or after the next round of let's see, calls or presentations as a final and another because I believe that this will be answered as we continue the presentation. So we will, if you have any more questions, please put them in there. We will take a look, but Kai, take it back and we can continue the program. Thank you.
Yeah, I know we're barreling towards 1:30, and it's so much information, it's so much data, and it's all the time we have for Q&A during this session. But if you have further questions about the research or its implications, please do not hesitate to reach out to myself at CTS, Becky Zogelman at CTA, or Dr. Nasser at Hart Research Associates. And so for our closing statements, I'd like to turn it over to Leslie Littman, Secretary Treasurer at CTA, and Dr. Tyrone Howard, Faculty Director at CTS. Leslie, if you'd like to go first.
Okay, I was like, wait, I don't know which order we're going.
Put them all together.
It's all good. It's Tuesday. So thank you. So given these findings, it's critical for the state and all of us to explore and embrace the many solutions suggested by the research. If we want to attract and keep people in the teaching profession, we need to ensure that they're appreciated and respected for the important work they do every day. We need to pay them a salary that's comparable to other professions with the same education and training requirements. We need to make sure that they can afford to live and own a home within the communities that they teach. We need to ensure that students and teachers have the supports they need to succeed both inside and outside of the classroom. Inside the classroom, that's smaller class sizes, time to collaborate and prepare lessons with colleagues. And outside of the classroom, which has an impact on what's going on inside, is additional counselors, psychologists, school nurses, and educational support professionals to help all of us meet the challenges that we are currently facing in schools today and just life in general. We have to embrace bold ideas, paying student teachers for the work they're doing in classrooms, like we do for doctors, electricians, and so many other professions with training requirements. We need to make hiring a diverse and inclusive teaching force, one that looks like our student population, a priority. It's going to take all of us to make this happen. As one of CTA's next steps, we will be convening some of our brightest educators with expertise in these areas so that they can grapple with what this study says and recommend a plan for CTA. Some of the areas we're going to be exploring include paid student teaching or teacher apprenticeships, streamlining credentialing requirements to move away from bureaucratic requirements and standardized testing and move towards mentorship and support, as well as improving diversity and equity issues in the workplace. I love being a teacher. Nothing beats that aha moment when you see the light bulb go off and you know a student got it, like Dr. Nasser spoke about. Teaching is the one profession that's the foundation for all that we do in this society. I think that that's really important to remember. And we owe it to our students and our educators to treat it as such. It's for many of our students, for our students, it's their one chance. And for all of us who are committed to making sure that that one chance is the best it can be, we all need to meet the challenge and do better. And thank you. And so with that, Dr. Howard.
Thank you, Leslie. I'm just sitting here in a state of just sadness, anger. I would say shocked and disbelief, but it's not shock and disbelief. But before I give my few comments, I just want to thank everyone with CTA, with Hart Research, and with Dr. Kai Matthews' leadership, because these data should be a wake-up call for all of us. And if this is not, I don't know what will be, because what we hear from the data is that conditions have gotten significantly worse since the data for our educators. We cannot say that we believe that young people are our most cherished commodity, but yet those who we place in care of our most cherished commodities, we don't cherish. We have to really take a look inward to say, what do we really think about educators? What are we really willing to do in terms of our sacrifice to support educators? How much do we really value the importance of public education? These are some deep soul-searching questions that we all must answer if we want to respond. You know, one of the things that was frequently said during the pandemic is that that moment at the height of the pandemic was going to give us an opportunity to reimagine public education and to reimagine the way we did schools and to rethink the way that we supported teachers and how we supported students. But as I heard these data, it just basically reminded me that we have not reimagined. We have not redone the work of public education. In some ways, we have gone back to the same way of doing business, which did not bode well for many people in the first place. As I went through these data points, there's so many different points that are deeply troubling. Basic needs around educators, acts of discrimination that teachers of color face, behavioral concerns that teachers face, the number who are not going to be in this profession in the next couple of years. I want to just offer up 3 points we can use to move forward in terms of our next action steps. I think number 1, we have to inform the wider public. We have to let everyone know what is going on in this state of California around what our teachers need. We have to get on the mountaintop and shout loud as loud can be to let folks know that this matters and your child is affected. No child is unaffected by this set of affairs. No child is unaffected. We have to get on the public relations campaign to say this is not somebody else's problem. This is all of our problem. That has to be our first step, is to increase the attention to the wider public. I think the second thing we have to do, we have to begin to put pressure on our elected officials, because this can begin to see some real transformation if we get our elected officials at the city levels, at the county levels, and at our state level to begin to understand that as COVID funds dry up, we cannot allow our educators and schools to fall off a financial and fiscal cliff. We need to put a big push to put more supports in schools around teacher pay, around reduced class sizes, around additional supports tied to nursing, counselors, social workers, after-school programs, mental health supports. We have to put pressure on our elected officials to say that this is a political issue as much as it is an educational issue. And the third thing I think we have to do, and I'll close out on this, is we have to ask, are we morally going to respond to this situation? Because I think this is not just a fiscal issue, not just a political and academic issue. This is also a moral issue. Now, it's a moral issue from the standpoint that we have individuals who take significant pay cuts to enter this profession, yet they're constantly being told that they are not sufficient enough. They're constantly being told that they are not valued. They're constantly being told that they are not critical to the education of our young people. This is a moral question for every Californian to answer. How can we be better? How can we know? How can we care? And most importantly, how can we act in such a way that tells us that if we truly care about all children in the state of California, we have to be concerned about those who are given the responsibility of helping to bring out the best and the brightest of our young people. So while I sit here frustrated, angry, bothered, I think it also motivates me to act. And I would plead everyone out there within earshot of this conversation to think about how can we all act individually, but then mobilize collectively to do what's best for our schools. Thank you so much, and let's roll our sleeves up and get to the work.
Thank you, Leslie and Tyrone, for those closing statements and giving us something to think about. That concludes our webinar. I hope you all have a great Tuesday, rest of your Tuesday. And again, heed the words and take bold action based off of what you've heard here today.
Thank you. And for the media still on, look for our news release to go out along with the link to the documents and a link to this Zoom webinar. Thank you again to everyone for being here today. We will see you soon.